Here we are at the 1 year mark of my YouTube channel. It was a year ago in August that I published my first cute little video on apple pie wine. And I thought this is the perfect time to assess my work over the last year and point out the mistakes that I made along the way, because I think that the mistakes I've made are, generally speaking, mistakes that other people make as well, especially in their first year of homebrew. So without further ado, number 10, using red yeast. This is what I did in my Cherry Concord wine. It resulted in a stuck or sluggish fermentation, which probably could have been avoided if I used a tailored wine yeast like Lauven 71B, Premier Cuvée, Premier Classic, and so on. Red yeast is made to make bread. Make the little tiny extra investment of getting wine yeast. It'll make a big difference in the end. Number 9, I now really don't think there's any need ever to use a 1-gallon glass carboy in primary fermentation. Because if you use a bucket, like a 2-gallon bucket, you can make about 1 1/4 gallon of wine, kind of overshoot it. And then when you rack into secondary, and you leave some behind because of the sediment and the yeast and all that, you can still then fill up that 1-gallon carboy all the way to the top and reduce headspace and risk of oxidation. So just don't do them, okay? I know there's a lot of YouTube videos out there where they have the nice, pretty looking fermentations in carboys. It's not worth it. The aesthetic does not outweigh the utility of using a bucket in primary fermentation. This is another one where I just don't think there's any reason to have spices like cinnamon, cardamom, allspice in primary when you can just add them in secondary. Because the issue is that you never know how long primary fermentation is gonna take. You have to realize your wine or your mead is gonna extract flavor from those spices forever if you let it. And there is a point at which it's gross. I found this with my Asterglen.
Ooh. Yeah.
Which I left spices in for 2 months. It was yucky, it was bitter. The best way to do it is add the spices in secondary and then taste your product every week. And then once it's right where you want it to be, you've got enough flavor extraction, you rack it out of that, get them off the spices, and you're good. So just put it in secondary. Number 7, only using diammonium phosphate or DAP for yeast nutrient. It's really just not the best chemical compound to be using. The better ones to use are Go Firm for rehydration, and then Fermade O, which you then add in a staggered fashion over the first week of fermentation. So I realize that's a mouthful, but if you want more information on that, you can check out my pineapple mead video, my strawberry peach mead video, where I kind of talk about what's called tailored organic staggered nutrient additions. Number 6, not experimenting with fruit in secondary, which you have to realize when you're making any kind of fruit wine. The flavor profile is going to change, and sometimes drastically, from the original fruit juice. If you want more of the original like fruity flavor, it's best to add that fruit in secondary when most of the fermentation activity is done. Because when yeast operate on the fruit juice or on the fruit, they change the flavor profile. Just realize, grape juice does not taste at all like the wide variety of grape-based wines that are made. It's because yeast do crazy things. It really is open to all kinds of experimentation. You as the winemaker have got to experiment and see what you like. But that's my suggestion. Number 5, adjusting acid and tannin levels with lemon juice or black tea. Now, I understand the whole natural home brewing idea. I get it. And if that's what you're going for, you can use those natural alternatives to acid blends and tannin powders. That's totally fine, but you've got to realize what you're doing. It's very difficult to quantify the acid addition of half a lemon squeezed into a fermentation or a whole lemon. You're not really gonna know how much acidity you're gonna get by doing it that way, or a cup of black tea. It's like painting with a broad brush. You really can't fine tune the tannin and acid additions when you do it from lemon juice or from black tea. It's better to use acid blends where you can measure it out exactly, or tannin powders, which also you can measure out. For more precision, use acid and tannin powders. Number 4, beginning a fermentation with a starting gravity of 1.120 or above. That level of sugar saturation is very difficult for yeast to ferment out. So on my very first how to make wine out of grape juice video, I had a starting gravity of 1.120. And then my yeast stalled out, and it took 9 or so months to get it down to 1.020. You can't lessen the amount of sugar in your wine. Once it's in there, it's in there. So just start with a lower gravity of like 1.090, and then that'll probably go completely dry. You'll get 13% alcohol, and that's perfectly respectable. You don't need to be starting at a gravity of 1.020, 1.030. It's just not an ideal condition for yeast to operate in. Number 3, back sweetening and bottling on the same day. Now, it's totally okay, as far as I found, to do that with white table sugar, if that's what you're back sweetening with, just add it right away. It clears up, it dissolves, and then you can bottle, as long as you stabilize too. When you do it with honey though, you need to wait a week. I have now found 3 different times in my pineapple mead and my strawberry peach mead and one more that when I added honey, it made the wine hazy, it made the mead hazy. And then when I bottled it up, all the sediment from the honey, proteins and the particulates settled out at the bottom of the wine bottles. And that's gross. You don't want to serve a product with a bunch of dense cake at the bottom of your bottles. So you want to wait a week to allow that haze to clear up, to allow any of the stuff that's in the honey to settle out. Number 2, assuming that correlation is causation. I realize it's kind of an abstract point, but all I mean here is that unless you're controlling all of the variables and you only change one at a time and you repeat that multiple times, you're never gonna know with certainty what is causing what in your wine or mead. So you don't wanna make generalizations based on that and then offer advice to other people. So for example, in my pineapple mead video, I said that you shouldn't use the Dole pineapple juice that comes in the aluminum cans because when I did that once, the wine came out tasting metallic. Okay, maybe it was caused by the aluminum cans, but then a lot of people on Facebook in particular told me that they had not found that to be the case. They've made it and they had no metallic taste. So again, it's important to realize that just because one thing is correlated with another, you can't just automatically infer causation, okay? The number 1 mistake that I have made is throwing together a recipe without researching it first. Now, that is not by no means the majority of the videos I've done, but there have on occasion been times where I just thought, common sense, let's just grab this fruit and with this honey and throw it together and ferment it. Sometimes that works, but sometimes it does not, and you end up making pretty big blunders, big mistakes you could have avoided by just doing a little bit of research. So on the mango mead, I fermented it on the skins, because we're gonna ferment them on the pulp, on the skins, we're using all of it. And the wine came out really, really sour and gross. You're not supposed to do that, and a quick Google search would have cleared that up. Do a little bit of research into your basic recipe idea first before you spend a lot of money on fruit and honey and other products and make a big mistake that you could have avoided. So that's it. I hope you've gotten something out of it and seen some mistakes that you've made as well and inspiration for how to fix them. As I've always said, I'm not an expert in winemaking, cider making, mead making. I just do it as a hobby, so this channel has always been part tutorial, but part exploration of trying out new different types of fermentations, and I'm bringing you along the way to do it with me. So if you enjoyed that list, please leave a like on this video. If you have other mistakes that you as a homebrewer have made, leave them in the comments. If you have other mistakes you've seen me make that you think I should know about, leave them in the comments as well. But in the meantime, go and check out any of my other videos, give me your feedback, and have a great day. Bye-bye.